By now, anyone with interest is probably fully aware of the allegations Charisma Carpenter made against Joss Whedon. But if somebody missed it, on February 10th, Charisma Carpenter took to social media to detail the alleged abusive behavior she suffered at the hands of Joss Whedon while working with him. She described the sets of Buffy and Angel as hostile and toxic work environments. For years, there had been rumors that Charisma Carpenter's pregnancy angered Joss Whedon and eventually led to her firing. But in her post, Charisma Carpenter shed further light on the extent of the abuse she allegedly received at Joss Whedon's hands. It's a pretty lengthy and genuinely heartbreaking post that details the abuse that is unfortunately all too common. However, there was a time when hearing that Joss Whedon did any of this would have been hard to believe, to say the least. But now it just seems like the last nail in the coffin, the latest piece in a growing body of evidence exposing Joss Whedon as an abuser dressed in an ally's clothing. Although it wasn't shocking, it was depressingly disappointing. It also left many fans reeling, wondering how to move forward. Can we still comfortably enjoy the shows he helped bring to life, and that, in many cases, helped shape who we are? The validity of his feminism has been brought into question before. Remember his Wonder Woman script? But the first real damage came in 2017, when his ex-wife Kai Cole wrote a scathing account of their relationship. She referred to him as a hypocrite who didn't live the feminist ideals he preached. In her article, she claimed that Joss Whedon hid multiple affairs with actresses, co-workers, friends, and even fans. A couple of years later, the curtain hiding his predatory behavior was drawn back some more when Ray Fisher accused Joss Whedon of gross, abusive, unprofessional, and completely unacceptable behavior while working on Justice League. But Charisma Carpenter's revelations amounts to what could and really should be seen as the last straw. At this point, nothing short of willful ignorance could explain why anyone paying attention would still believe that Joss Whedon was ever the feminist champion he masqueraded as for decades. In fact, it now seems that the public image he built his career on was nothing but a front. Since then, others like Amber Benson and Michelle Trachtenberg have also added their voices to the chorus of accusations, and other cast members like David Boreanaz and James Marsters came out in support as well. It almost seems hard to believe now, but it wasn't that long ago that Joss Whedon was undoubtedly considered one of the good ones. But now that seems like a distant memory. There are few people whose stars have fallen as dramatically as Joss Whedon's has over the last few years. His seminal series, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, starring Sarah Michelle Gellar, was not only beloved by millions, but was also seen as a groundbreaking milestone for female representation on television. Buffy wasn't the hero's love interest, she was a hero herself. Because of that, she was important to millions of young girls who could finally see themselves reflected as more than just a male character's object of affection. Although if we look back on it now, it becomes clear that the show always had a very limited idea of feminism. Its representation was limited to white, thin, conventionally attractive actresses, and the less said about the show's treatment of people of color, the better. But it's important to consider the context and remember that, although its feminism now seems laughably dated, it was an important step at the time. And it really shouldn't be a surprise that the man who created Firefly would have a special place in the hearts of millions of geeks worldwide. Although that show had a very short life, it gained a massive cult following of fans who are still passionate about it to this day. The show was also an early example of just how strong fan culture could be. Although Firefly was unceremoniously canceled, it somehow got a full-length theatrical film, Serenity, that was practically willed into existence by passionate fans. It was also excellent. Whedon also did some excellent comic book writing. His Astonishing X-Men run was beloved and very influential, and seeing the Avengers on the big screen for the first time is still one of my favorite movie-going experiences of all time. I can still remember being in a theater with people who loved the movie just as much as I did, and we all burst into applause and laughter together. After the film, a stranger in the bathroom line asked me if I had just seen the Avengers, and we high-fived because it was so great. All that isn't meant to defend Joss Whedon, but to illustrate why the person he turned out to be is so disappointing to so many of us. For many of us, Joss Whedon wasn't just a person behind the camera, but someone we respected and even looked up to. And there are a few people whose creative voice is as instantly recognizable as Joss Whedon's. When you watch a Whedon show or movie, you know it's him. Because of that, it's especially hard to separate Joss Whedon from his work. That's why he's been so important to so many of his fans. He inspired a sort of viewer loyalty and admiration in a way that few showrunners or even directors ever have. He's hardly the first person to create popular or even groundbreaking shows. In fact, other people have made bigger shows, but they didn't become as important to fans as Whedon was. When we enjoyed his work, whether it was Buffy, Firefly, The Avengers, or any of his other creations, Whedon's influence and voice were hard to miss. He wasn't some random, interchangeable showrunner, but the creator that gave life to the characters we loved. He was also a very visible public figure whose own fame rivaled that of the characters he created and the actors who portrayed them. He was there at all the events, fans lined up to meet him or just to hear him speak. In fact, it wasn't just fans that celebrated him and his work. The media elevated him as well. His feminism wasn't in question. In fact, in 2013, the human rights group Equality Now celebrated his work and labeled him a champion of storytelling fighting for gender equality. And that's at least part of the reason why it hit so hard to hear the accusations against him. While he pretended to be a thoughtful, caring feminist, it seems that he was abusing his power and the people who worked for him and trusted him. Not only that, but many of us celebrated him as if we personally knew him. But it's important to understand and acknowledge that this kind of behavior is wrong regardless of how much we love the shows and characters he created. It is entirely possible to create great art without mistreating people. I refuse to believe that any of his shows or movies would have somehow been less enjoyable if Joss Whedon actually was the caring champion he made himself out to be, or even just a decent human being. We often let people in positions of power get away with things that no one should, and apparently he's been getting away with this stuff for decades. A lot of times, we want to sweep inconvenient truths under the carpet. This is especially true when someone creates something special for us. We tend to get attached and protective of the things we love, even more so if it's something that played a formative role in our childhoods. So when something like the accusations against Joss Whedon comes to light, we don't want to believe them over a fear of tainting the things we love, or because we worry that we might not be able to enjoy them anymore. And when someone does speak up, it takes about a second or so before someone doubts them. People often turn on the victims for speaking up instead of the abuser for doing the awful things. Why did they wait so long to speak up? Why did they keep working with them? Questions like these get tossed around instead of compassion and understanding. The fact is that there are many reasons people don't speak up. One of those reasons is that they're afraid that people won't believe them, and when they finally do speak up, they realize immediately that they were right to be afraid. But the shows or entertainment we love aren't more important than the people who made them, and we need to stand with them. It might be uncomfortable to admit that someone whose creations we loved and meant so much to us could be an abusive hypocrite, but we can't ignore the victims. One of the reasons this kind of behavior persists for so long is that people are always willing to look the other way, and it's important to remember that we only felt like we knew him. We didn't. And perhaps now is the first time we're actually seeing the real Joss Whedon. And now that we see him for who he really is, we have to act accordingly by standing with and supporting the victims, not defending or making excuses for abusers. I think by now it should be clear that we, as fans, have power. How many shows were saved or brought back after cancellation because of fan efforts? So if we as fans can rally together to help the shows we love, we should also be able and willing to do the same thing to make sure people like Joss Whedon don't stay in positions of power anymore. But I don't think that we have to abandon everything Joss Whedon helped bring to life. I believe that not only can we still enjoy them, but perhaps now we can do so more objectively. I can personally say that as a Joss Whedon fan, I used to accept things in shows like Buffy because Joss Whedon's involvement felt like a sort of seal of approval. If I'm being honest, I thought Sanders' behavior throughout most of the show was pretty awful even at a young age. The Buffy sex bot weirded me out, I cringed at the awfulness of Kendra's accent, among other things. However, I either overlooked them or convinced myself that I just didn't get what Joss Whedon was going for. The man literally won awards for his feminism, so who was I to question any of it? So I think we could still enjoy the shows without idolizing the creator. Instead, we can watch them while recognizing the problematic aspects we either missed or ignored in the past. But it's also important to remember that Joss Whedon wasn't the only one who created the shows or movies we love, because that is literally not how shows or movies get made. Personally, I always heard great things about the Buffy comics, but I could never get into it. And the reason for that is that Buffy was never just Joss Whedon or even the writing. For me, and I'm willing to bet a lot of other people, it was also the actors who brought the characters to life. And because of that, I believe there's still a place in our lives for shows like Firefly, Buffy, Angel, and all the other ones, because Joss Whedon didn't make them alone, and he doesn't get to take them away from us or ruin them for everyone.